old Hewlett-Packard conglomerate have been under pressure because of weak hardware and supply sales. Shares moving lower in extended trading. Our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, with me now here in the studio, as well as our Bloomberg contributing editor, David Kirkpatrick of Techonomy, joining us from New York. So, Corey, I'll start with you. What do these latest round of cuts actually mean? Is this the end, or will there be more?
Is this the end? This is unprecedented for any company out there to take one-time restructuring charges for 16 years and announce that it's going to continue. They have taken over, I was going through my model right now, and I couldn't even believe the numbers I looked at. They've taken well over $18 billion in charges since 2000, and they've taken these consistently. Now, certainly things are tough, and there's some macroeconomic conditions there, but there's also sort of this, you can't look at 16 years, 17 years of problems now and say management has nothing to do with this. This company has been kind of run into the ground. They haven't been able to find their way out of it. They were dealt a tough hand as the industry changed, but with every strategic decision they've made, they've had one nightmare after the next, and the people who are paying for it are the HP employees.
David, would you agree that management is to blame?
Well, you know, it's a hard business. I just was quickly looking. It looks like the stock is at the same price it was in '95. You know, I guess you have to blame management that they didn't do something different. What they should have done, I can't really argue. I don't know. If you're in the PC business and you don't have a smartphone, you know, business that goes along with it, it's a very difficult place to be right now, at least if you're trying to sell to consumers. HP obviously has a lot of enterprise customers, but even for them, a smartphone, a more mobile strategy, that's something clearly they should have developed. You know, they bought Palm, and then they basically squandered it. So there's a case of something that I think they did poorly. Yeah, I think they're kind of inept over there on balance.
So, Corey, talk to us. We talk a lot more about HP Enterprise these days, which Meg Whitman still runs today. Talk to us about HP Inc. and how well the company in particular is doing post-split.
Well, and cleverly named, right? Because it's Inc. with an INC, but it could be Inc. with the INK, because the printer business has been the key there. And that business has tended to throw off cash for so many years. It let the misadventures of Carly Fiorina and Meg Whitman, and maybe you throw Mark Hurd in there, maybe you don't. The company certainly had better results under Hurd. But what you've seen from this company is, while PCs have contracted, there's been kind of a surprise contraction in the printer business. The printer business, really in the last 6 quarters or so, has really underperformed. And the reasons are unclear, and it certainly goes across the industry there. But that's been the thing that business has been able to rely on from a cash standpoint. It's a big free cash flow business. The sales of ink and paper are most of that business, and they've done well with that in the past. The slowdown in printers really exposes the weakness in all the other parts of the business.
David, you wonder how the tale of HP, now 2 HPs, will play out over the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, I think Dell going private is a threat to them because it will give Dell more flexibility. Lenovo being a Chinese company, which gives, you know, a lot of strange and sometimes significant advantages because there's an opacity to that we don't really match here. So I would say it's a tough row to hoe for the HP Inc. HP Enterprise is a whole nother story. I think they've made some smart moves. They've made some moves I disagree with. I'd say actually HP Inc. is the company of the two that probably is more something to worry about.
Interesting, Corey, given that Meg Whitman and Michael Dell have had choice words for each other. Meg Whitman, who has said over and over again, leaner is better. Michael Dell, who has said bigger is better. You wonder which one of those theories will actually stand the test of time.
If you look even broader across the industry, if you look at Dell, EMC, HP, Oracle's Sun business, their hardware business, throw in Cisco, the hardware slingers of yore are all struggling. Cisco, the only one that's actually seeing consistent gains. And Cisco's a company that has done just as many, even more acquisitions than HP, but done things that have really helped their business grow in the hardware slinging business. But we're in a different world now. We're in a world where Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or even Google's cloud efforts are the dominant form of computing going forward. The companies that are trying to sell a box into every server room, trying to get every company to buy all that hardware, are not in the same pole position they were only a few years ago.
All right. Well, another 4,000 employees being laid off at HP Inc. Hard time for those particular people. Corey Johnson, our editor-at-large, David Kirkpatrick, our Bloomberg contributing editor, you are sticking with me. Now, to another story we are following. Yahoo's deal with Verizon is in jeopardy. Verizon's top attorney says it would be, quote, reasonable to assume that Yahoo's 2014 breach represents a material impact to the pending acquisition. This, according to a person familiar with the matter. This leaves open the chance that Verizon could withdraw completely from the $4.83 billion deal. Bloomberg News' Creighton Harrison joins us now live from New York, along with David Kirkpatrick, who's still with me. So, Creighton, what's the likelihood at this point that this deal actually does still get done?
I think there's still a really good likelihood the deal gets done. Verizon's still in this deal with Yahoo because it wants some of the pieces that Yahoo provides. That's all this digital advertising technology. It's the users themselves. I think there's like 1 billion people that use Yahoo, maybe a little less since this breach has been announced. But those are still things it wants. What could come into play is do you use this as a way to go back and say, you know what, maybe 4.83 billion is a little more than we should be paying given the knowledge that we now have.
So, David, you know, there's some precedent for terms of deals getting changed, for deals not happening. What's your take on how serious this issue with Yahoo is and if it will materially impact this particular deal?
Well, I'm with Creighton. I think the chances are best that Verizon will use it as a negotiating tool to get a lower price. There really isn't another place they can go get another billion users of internet products if what they want to do is bolster their own business in the content direction. And you know, the email system problems are real, but we haven't really seen any evidence of what the cost to Yahoo is going to be. Clearly, if I was in the position of Verizon, I would use it to try to bargain down the price. And that's what they seem to be doing, even by making a statement like they made today. That's probably part of the goal of making that statement.
Creighton, how much longer is the investigation or this process actually going to take?
Our understanding is that Yahoo is about halfway through this investigation. And let's be clear on that. Yahoo is the one that has to do this. Verizon can't actually, because they're not officially one company, Verizon can't actually go and look at, you know, verify that it was 500 million accounts, look at each of them, make sure that they know exactly what was breached and what was compromised. So Yahoo is doing that, and it's going to take, I guess, probably a few more weeks before they wrap things up.
So, David, what are you thinking if you're Marissa Mayer right now?
Oh, I'm probably really, really tired of all this. And I obviously, she's not having a good month, maybe a good year. My guess is she's going to be very relieved once Verizon does buy it, which, like Creighton, I do believe will still happen. She said she might hang around. I doubt if that's very likely. And, you know, I think she'd really rather be thinking about her family right now, which has been growing and I know is very important to her. So, you know, wow, what a tough challenge she's had these last few years.
All right. Well, we're, of course, going to continue this follow story as this develops. David Kirkpatrick, our Bloomberg contributing editor, you are sticking with me. Creighton Harrison of Bloomberg News, thanks so much for that update. Coming up, Alibaba chair Jack Ma signals tremendous challenges ahead for e-commerce. Should investors be worried? We will discuss. Plus, later, Donald Trump embraces an unlikely ally in the final weeks of a roller coaster campaign, WikiLeaks. But does Julian Assange return the admiration? We'll discuss. This is Bloomberg. Amazon is anticipating a strong holiday season. The e-commerce giant saying it'll add 120,000 seasonal workers to support growing customer demand. That's 20% more workers than last year. These people will work at Amazon's fulfillment centers and customer service sites in the United States. Meantime, competitors have taken more cautious views. Macy's and Target both say they plan to hire about the same number of seasonal workers as last year. Another story we are watching, Alibaba Chair Jack Ma and CEO Daniel Zhang released their annual letters to shareholders. The letters recapped some of Alibaba's impressive achievements to date, as many as 430 million annual active buyers, generating more than 75% of their business on mobile, translating into gross transactions of more than 3 trillion yuan. But Jack Ma also sounded a note of caution, saying that as e-commerce becomes the main way people shop, the industry might get disrupted all over again. Quote, "In the coming years, we anticipate the birth of a reimagined retail industry driven by the integration of online, offline logistics and data across a single value chain, with e-commerce itself rapidly becoming a traditional business. Pure e-commerce players will soon face tremendous challenges that sent shares sliding in Thursday trade." Joining me now for more, GGV managing partner Hans Tung and Bloomberg News reporter Selena Wang. Also, our guest host for the hour, Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick in New York. So, Hans, I'll start with you. How unusual is it to hear Jack Ma saying these things publicly?
Right. I think in the past, when they were a private company, Jack has no problems making very bodacious claims and share his vision. I think it's the first time he has done that since the company went public. I think it denotes a renewed sense of confidence that he has on what he's doing. And what he didn't say in the shareholder letter is that his investor, Alibaba's investor in the second largest electronics retailer in China, Suning, and they're, I think, already #1 in terms of profitability. So he is only one who's uniquely positioned to pour off this omni-channel strategy. That's why he's saying what he's saying.
So, right. Why say this publicly? What are the actual implications of it? You know, obviously the stock didn't do well as a result.
Jack Ma is feeling very confident, as Hans said. They had a really great past few years. It's not, they just IPO'd, things are still rocky. He's feeling very good about the results. You just said some very impressive numbers. Also, they're invested in lots of offline retailers like Suning, like In Time, which is a high-end department store. So they really are saying, you know what, e-commerce is now old. It's traditional. We have to push to the next phase, which means helping those offline guys get online, and we can help you to bring it all together.
So confidence is one thing, Hans, but how well positioned is Alibaba to innovate their supply chain, logistics, payments, to beat the other businesses that are trying to do the same thing?
Right. Well, no one else can do what they're doing right now. Over the last 2 years, what people haven't talked about is that they actively recruit great engineers from Google, from LinkedIn, from Facebook here in the Valley to go back to China, to Hangzhou. And their recommendation engine has become so much more efficient. Other pure e-commerce companies, whether the likes of VIP Shop or JD.com, need to pay attention to what Ali is doing. Like you mentioned, they are investing a lot of money in logistics and in payment and linkages that make supply chain work better for them. One of the things that they haven't talked about is that they're actively working with Sina, Weibo, on influencers who are popular in China to get them to encourage consumers to come up with products they like, and they have a very flexible supply chain to manufacture that and meet the demand on very rapid pace. I think that is something that has not been talked about. Over the next 1 or 2 years, you will see that coming from them in a way that no one else has been able to do.
Let's talk a little bit about the health of the Chinese consumer, because there have been concerns about the macroeconomic environment in China, the Chinese economy being flat. However, you hear repeatedly from, including the leadership at Alibaba, that consumers are still spending money. In fact, they're spending more money than ever before. And it's sort of, from a Western perspective, perhaps it's been a little bit incongruous because some people continue to believe, well, but the numbers in the Chinese economy still don't look that great. I spoke to Joe Tsai, co-founder of Alibaba, around their latest earnings report. Take a listen to what he had to say.
In the long run, you look at the Chinese households, there's $4.6 trillion of net cash savings on the balance sheet of Chinese households. This is because over the last few years, they've had real wage increases. They don't have a lot of mortgage debt on the books. And this is all going to provide the foundation for very, very strong growth of consumption.
David, what do you make of sort of the potentially conflicting narratives of what we see from the government and the overall numbers in the Chinese economy and what people are saying about the health of the Chinese consumer?
Well, I think from Alibaba's point of view, they're making bold statements. I think what Hans was just saying before about their ability to integrate social influence with sales and predict sales, and then their extremely sophisticated supply chain kicking in, that is pretty exciting. I think, the Chinese economy is not my expertise, but one thing I know, despite all that savings, a lot of Chinese are very concerned about their long-term retirement, et cetera. People save a lot there because they don't have a lot of long-term economic security in their own minds, and spending is something it's hard to force them to do. So on the other hand, Alibaba's growth, they've done better at making people spend than any other institution in China, I would say. So you've got to admire these guys, and I think, by the way, I just want to say, calling themselves a traditional, their industry, their central business, a traditional business is again really bold, and I think the stock should not drop on that. It should really go up because it shows they're looking beyond the present into something even more interesting.
So, Hans, do you see consumer spending habits changing? Do you see them becoming more price sensitive? Do you see household spending declining, or do you see all these things only getting better?
Well, Chinese consumer is not just one block, as you know. The millennials in China, let's say 300 million block. They travel, they do outbound travel frequently. They go on Airbnb, they sip coffee at the Starbucks, they eat ice cream from Haagen-Dazs. They're extremely globalized, and increasingly more so. So I think those are the shoppers that Alibaba's counting on to spend more with Ali. And at the end of the day, internet as a percent of GDP is only 5%. So Alibaba's growing, e-commerce is pushing, but it's still a small segment of the population, so of the whole economy. I think there's plenty of room for them to grow, despite what's happening on the macro level.
Selena, what about over the longer term?
I mean, like Hans and David said, they are turning shopping into a social habit. You take a look at Taobao, it's amazing. It's kind of modeled a little bit against like Tencent's WeChat. You can shop on it, you can talk to people, you can join groups talking about fishing or wedding planning or buying baby products. They have very famous people who live stream, putting on makeup, showcasing different products. People open this app 7 times a day. That's insane. These are not e-commerce numbers. I do not open Amazon 7 times a day. What they're doing is really incredible. They've been able to blend social networking and e-commerce in a way that their U.S. counterparts really haven't been able to do.
Hans, I want to talk a little bit about the rise of cloud computing and big data as part of Alibaba's business model. This is something that they've been touting as a big part of their future. Daniel Zhang, the CEO of Alibaba, saying cloud computing and big data will become ubiquitous. Data has already become the new natural resource that is as vital as oil and electricity. Cloud computing is the new engine powering commercial operations. How big do you think this business could be?
Right now, the numbers they reported this quarter was 187 million, losing 24. Seems small, but they have been going at it for 3-4 years. And before, you always say Alibaba is great at sales, great at vision, but not so much on technology. But what I've seen in the last 2-3 years, so they have caught up. The fact that they can bring best engineers worldwide to work for them. They set up a big campus here in the Bay Area. They have set up office in Seattle. They're recruiting the best to join them. And it's a pretty scary combination when you have technology catching up to their vision.
And how do you see Alibaba's cloud business comparing to Google or Amazon or Microsoft?
There's still a gap. There's no question about that. But the tenacity.
Will they get there? And will they get there globally?
I think China for sure. Globally, we have to see. But I think I'm very bullish that they can do that in China.
All right, Hans Tung, partner at GGV, Selena Wang, our Bloomberg News reporter, David Kirkpatrick, our Bloomberg contributing editor. You're sticking with me. Still ahead, Sony is banking on a virtual reality, hoping to bring its new headset to the mass market. We'll catch up with Sony PlayStation chief Sean Layden later this hour. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Tech are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 6 p.m. in New York, 3 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. On today's funding board, SoftBank is forming a global technology fund that the bank says could eventually be worth as much as $100 billion. Immediate plans include investing $25 billion over the next 5 years. The fund would be managed in the UK. SoftBank says it's in talks with a few large global investors, one of which might be Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which is considering a potential investment of as much as $45 billion. A surprise for Tesla investors after CEO Elon Musk tweeted that he won't need to raise equity or borrow money this quarter. The electric car maker has access to credit lines worth up to $1.3 billion that could potentially keep the company going into next year, when analysts expect Tesla will need as much as $2.5 billion for production of its Model 3 sedan and the Gigafactory battery plant. Discovery Communications is investing $100 million in a new digital media holding company. Group 9 Media is made up of several millennial-focused brands like Thrillist, Now This, and The Dodo. Discovery will become a minority investor and have the option of buying a controlling stake at a later date. The investment is the latest partnership between TV networks and web publishers. Last year, NBC Universal invested $200 million in both BuzzFeed and Vox Media, and earlier this year, Turner led investments in Refinery 29 and Mashable. Coming up, artificial intelligence is upon us. We'll give you the latest from the White House report on how to handle the rise of AI. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's get a check of your first word news. Hurricane Nicole roared across Bermuda today, hitting the resort island with winds up to 115 miles per hour. The Category 3 storm flooded homes and knocked out power to an estimated 26,000 residences and businesses. Forecasters say by early this afternoon, Nicole was about 90 miles northeast of Bermuda. Hurricane-force winds were expected to continue through tonight. Syrian activists say at least 65 people have been killed in the past 3 days during shelling and airstrikes in Aleppo. Meantime, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry are scheduled to resume talks on Saturday in an effort to end the violence. Iran says it will deploy 2 warships near Yemen. Iranian officials say the move is part of a regular anti-piracy patrol. But the announcement comes just after the U.S. carried out strikes for the first time against Yemen's Shiite Houthi rebels, who are supported by Iran. The American strikes came after missile fire from rebel-held areas hit near the USS Mason, which is deployed off Yemen. Thailand's crown prince is asking for a delay in proclaiming him king so that he can join the rest of the nation in mourning the death today of Bhumibol Adulyadej. The 88-year-old Bhumibol became king in 1946 and was the world's longest reigning monarch. I'm Mark Crumpton. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Thursday here in New York, 9:30 Friday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. And markets in Thailand will be open today despite the death of the Thai king. Markets already up and running in New Zealand. We're currently seeing the NZX off 0.1%. We're expecting to see gains on the ASX, though, at the open in a little under half an hour's time. Although mining stocks BHP, Billiton and Rio Tinto may drag after having a very tough session in London. Nikkei futures looking mixed right now. Be worth keeping an eye on fast retailing shares. The clothing retailer was out with earnings after the close yesterday. Net income missed estimates, off more than 56% to about $400 million. And forecasts for the coming year also missed estimates. Keep an eye on Hanjin shares in Seoul, meanwhile. This is the troubled shipping line, enjoyed a 30% bounce in late trade yesterday. A court in Seoul may post a sale on assets today, so that's something to watch out for as well. A lot of data out today as well, including South Korea trade for September, expecting to see an improvement in export prices there. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Is the world on the brink of a fourth industrial revolution spurred by the rise of artificial intelligence and robotics? The World Economic Forum is reporting that by 2020, over 5 million jobs could be lost in 15 major and emerging economies. Meantime, the White House is highlighting the same issue in a 48-page report on how to handle the rise of AI. Joining us now to discuss from Seattle, Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence CEO Oren Etzioni, who has over 25 years of experience in this field, and Alex Moore, CEO of Boomerang, an assistant that uses AI to improve your email. And still with us from New York, my guest host, David Kirkpatrick. Oren, I want to start with you. What do you think about this particular report? What did they get right? What did they miss in 48 pages?
Well, it is a lengthy report, as you point out. You know, I have it right here, and I think it's sane and it's balanced. I think the basic point is some of the tremendous worries that really come from Hollywood, like the Terminator, are way overblown. I think there's huge potential benefits for society, for the economy, and at the same time, I do think there's a valid concern about jobs, and we need to do something about it.
So, David, obviously, I know you talk to a lot of CEOs, a lot of people at the top about AI. You know, this is something that you guys are debating at Techonomy. Do you think it's overblown, or do you think this is a real potential problem?
Well, I don't think the fact that AI is going to be socially transformative is overblown. I do believe we are in something that could be called a fourth industrial revolution, as the World Economic Forum calls it. And I think it's wonderful to see the White House putting this kind of attention on the issue. I think it's really unknown how the jobs issue plays out, and I think it has a lot to do with how we as a society handle this incredible new resource that this kind of intelligence brings to us. One of my friends who's at the conference today tweeted, this is Jesse Hempel, said that the conference is really about humanness, which is really good, because the key question is going to be, how do we manage the intersection between people and this extraordinarily powerful technology? And I think if we do it sensitively, it can be by far a net benefit to society.
Alex, you're nodding. A 2013 Oxford study concluded that 47% of U.S. jobs are at risk of being handled by machines over the next decade, 2 decades. There's this concern about mass unemployment. You run a company where you do incorporate a lot of AI into your product, and I wonder, if AI didn't exist, how many more jobs would exist?
Well, I think the thing that was really delightful to see in the report is that they did take time to look at how AI and humans can work together in the report. And they cited, the best chess in the world is not being played by AIs or people. It's being played by teams of AIs and people working together. And the best radiology results they've seen so far isn't radiologists or AIs, it's the two working together. And I think that's sort of informed our philosophy too. I mean, the tools that we make help you write a better email. They don't write it for you. And I think that's really a somewhat underappreciated aspect of the AI revolution that's coming, is the capability of us and machines to work together and do really amazing things together.
Oren, President Obama and others have suggested that the only way to deal with this in the future will be universal basic income. Is that realistic? Is that going to be widely accepted?
I definitely disagree that universal basic income is the only way to deal with this, and I think even in the report the issue was raised, but there wasn't a definitive declaration. I think we need to think about training. I think we need to think about new jobs. Like Alex said, right, combining abilities. Third highest cause of, preventable deaths in American hospitals is medical error. Can computers be a part of that and save lives? Is AI part of the equation? Absolutely. We do need to think about jobs. We also need to think about consumers. We're all getting older. We'd love to have extra care, but we can't afford it as a society. Can robots, can AI systems be part of that? Can self-driving cars help the elderly be, safer drivers but be self-sufficient longer? There's so much here, and jobs is one component, but there's a lot more.
Alex, you just came from a big Hillary Clinton event in downtown San Francisco, and a lot of this is about what the government can do in this report. What do you think, whoever is elected, what do you think that the White House should be doing, and what should their role be in whether it's the fourth industrial revolution or not, but helping to manage this?
Yeah, I think there are two areas where the government's going to make a big difference. One is the report highlighted how important it is to focus on getting open data sets available for folks. And I think that's a huge thing. Some of the data that we use to build our product comes from open data sets. And if we don't have a good set of those, the innovation in AI is going to come from the Googles and the Microsofts and the Apples, the people who already have big data. And the small companies are going to get a little bit frozen out. The other thing is, the ability of machines to do jobs they couldn't, or to do tasks that they couldn't do previously, makes us all as a society, like as a broad society, richer, right? I mean, it gives us a lot more power, a lot more flexibility, a lot more opportunities. So I think there is going to be a big role in politics for determining, okay, there are going to be some winners and some losers from this. Can we make sure that the gains from this revolution are shared by everybody and that everybody has the opportunity to benefit from it?
All right. Alex Moore, CEO of Boomerang, Dr. Oren Etzioni, Artificial Intelligence CEO, joining us from Seattle. David Kirkpatrick, our Bloomberg contributing editor, you are sticking with me. Still ahead, the world's most famous hacktivist has found an unlikely ally in the world. We're talking about WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Next, this is Bloomberg. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is embracing an unusual ally in the final stretch of his campaign, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
The Hillary Clinton documents, have you been seeing this, what's going on? Released by WikiLeaks, make more clear than ever just how much is at stake in November and how unattractive and dishonest our country has become.
The latest batch of emails released apparently urge Clinton to deny she ever sent classified information on her private email. Reporter Max Chafkin of Bloomberg Businessweek writes about this in the latest edition of the magazine. Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick still with us as well. Max, I want to start with you. You know, some people say that this allegiance to Trump that WikiLeaks seems to have is a betrayal to the very foundation of WikiLeaks. Is this really a change in values?
I mean, it's certainly a departure. I mean, when we think of WikiLeaks, you think of the leak, the Cablegate leaks, as they're known, which happened in 2010. And you know, the big highlight of that was this video of a helicopter attack on some journalists. You know, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has long been a critic of you know, U.S. basically overreach overseas. And you know, he's basically you know, in effect embracing a candidate who's, you know, in favor of expanding that reach. Donald Trump has called for, you know, quote, closing up the internet. He's called for expanding the Guantanamo Bay prison. So it's a big departure, and I think it's really, as we argue in the story, a bid for relevance.
So I interviewed Kim.com, founder of Mega Upload, who is currently under house arrest in New Zealand for massive copyright infringement about a year and a half ago. And he corresponds with Julian Assange and told me in 2015 that Julian Assange would be a big problem for Hillary Clinton this year. Take a listen to what he had to say.
You're saying Julian Assange is going to be Hillary's worst nightmare in 2016.
I think so, yeah.
How so?
Well, he has access to information.
What information?
I don't know the specifics.
Why Hillary in particular?
Well, Hillary hates Julian. She is just an adversary of, I think, internet freedom.
I've corresponded with Kim a bit since then, and he maintained these emails are coming, they're coming, they're coming, and now here they are. What does Julian Assange get out of this, Max?
What Julian Assange gets out of it is an audience. You know, there is a large contingent of very committed supporters of Donald Trump. And as WikiLeaks has sort of, you know, started to feed the sort of what you might think of as the alt-right meme machine. So basically people who are on the Donald forum on Reddit, people who are reading Breitbart. As that's happened, you know, he's sort of amassed a contingent of supporters that I don't think existed before. And I think he's been able to tap into something. I mean, you know, in a lot of ways, WikiLeaks is sort of contrary to the whole Donald Trump phenomenon. On the other hand, a lot of these people are very skeptical of government. You know, they're very extreme in their beliefs, and I think there's some overlap there. So I think it's all about, you know, trying to get an audience.
David, this is a campaign that is changing literally by the minute, and it is fascinating to see how the Trump campaign has embraced online, embraced new platforms for a guy who hasn't really sent many emails in his lifetime.
Well, he doesn't seem to understand technology very well at all. He never talks about it. His platform really essentially doesn't address it. I think, you know, what a stark contrast to Obama's event that he's having today. I don't think Trump would even be capable of understanding why that event is happening. But I have to admit, Max's story is fantastic. But you know, you got to believe that Assange has been really frustrated. Like, he released those Podesta emails, and they just got overwhelmed in the news cycle by Trump's behavior. You know, they really didn't get the kind of attention that they probably would have otherwise. The other thing that is really interesting to me, and it seems to be unresolved, and I'd like to hear Max talk about it, is, you know, the potential to alter these emails, and the thought that the Russians may have been doing that. And at one point, as I understand it, Trump reacted to an email that was in some of these release materials that was clearly altered and had been documented as being altered. So this is really scary to me.
Yeah.
Max, go ahead, Max.
Well, so a couple of things. I mean, one is that, and what's super interesting about this Podesta thing is that it actually came after the NBC Access Hollywood leak, and it happened like mere minutes afterwards. So it actually seemed like Assange had been holding these, and he dropped them, in an effort to basically deflect attention from the leaks. And I think that's clearly what's been going on. He's been sort of doling these out in little drips and drabs as I think as a way to help kind of change the news cycle and to benefit the Trump campaign. Sorry.
So no, we'll have to leave it there, Max. But you're right; it is so fascinating. There hasn't really been an opportune time because so much is happening. Literally every minute, the campaign is changing. Both campaigns. Our Bloomberg Business Week reporter Max Chafkin, a great read. You should definitely check it out. Our guest host David Kirkpatrick. David, you're sticking with me. We'll be right back. Sony's $500 PlayStation VR headset is on sale worldwide, with many calling this an inflection point for the industry. That's because it's a high-end device competing with the Oculus Rift, but it's aimed at the mass market. Our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Coy Johnson, and Carol Masser caught up with Sony PlayStation chief Sean Layden and started by asking how many games are available for the hardware from the start.
So we reckon with the launch window, which is the first couple of weeks, starting from today, we'll have about 20 or 30, and we're tracking about 50 by the end of 2016.
Well, what's also interesting, too, is that when people talk about virtual reality, it kind of gets me excited because I just think there's so many different ways you can use it. There's industrial uses. There's healthcare uses. I'm just curious, what other potential markets are you guys looking at? Gaming is certainly a big one, but is your horizon kind of bigger?
Well, certainly it has to be. Our entree into VR is certainly through gaming. For 21 years, PlayStation has been the leader in console gaming in the home. That's our wheelhouse, if you will, and that's where we're attacking the market from. But I'll tell you right now, we've had interest from places as far afield as Hollywood studios, music and record companies, to the Smithsonian or Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Everyone's looking at VR. It is an absolutely new medium for both entertainment and education.
Do you expect that the killer app for these, the game that works the best, might be very different than what's worked in PlayStation?
I'm pretty sure that's going to be true, Corey. We have a number of games coming out between now and the end of the year, and you'll see that carrying on into early 2017. virtual reality is a complete greenfield technology. It's a place where no one has really gone before. So all of us are trying to learn exactly what plays best in that immersive environment. And I think you're going to see a lot of experimentation in the next 12 to 18 months. That's the real exciting part.
Talk to us about the cycle, Sean, because you got to have exciting games to get consumers to go out and say, I'm going to lay down $500 on a new piece of hardware, if you will. Gamers, though, or programmers, you know, they kind of wait for the audience also, though, to come. So where are you guys in that cycle? Do you feel like you have enough games out there to kind of bring in that consumer audience?
Yeah, I think we do. You know, one of the things about PlayStation VR is that it's already compatible with the 40 million plus PlayStation 4s that are out there in the world. So people who already own a PlayStation 4, you're halfway there to the VR experience. So we have the audience embedded in that way. And as far as the content goes, we have a wide array of titles that we're coming out with now, from not only independent developers and people new to the technology, but from the names you know and trust, like Electronic Arts and Warner Brothers. They're all looking at VR and the opportunities around that, but it's such a new technology. We're still trying to find out exactly what plays best in that experience.
As the development process goes on, how is developing for a virtual reality game different than developing say a first-person shooter game that also has sort of lots of thought about the environment that the player is in?
One of the tricky things, Corey, about VR is that we still have yet to develop what the vocabulary is to describe it, or the syntax or grammar, if you will. We're all trying to learn how to design in that environment where the idea of narrative, where it's not so much linear, but it's all around you, and the player can go and do whatever they want at any time, and can see things occurring not only in front of them but behind them, creates a whole new experience. And I think our designers are just starting to get their head around exactly what sort of special features that allows.
All right, Sean, my husband says I'm a pretty stubborn kind of gal. I got to go back to numbers because I know you guys don't have any early numbers, but I'm just curious, what kind of market size do you think this is for Sony? One number I saw that thought it could be not even quite $1 billion market, not just for you, but for all the players this year. I don't know. I mean, you guys are smart guys. You look at market size, you look at market potential. How big a market could it be for you in terms of revenues?
Well, we're looking at a market where I think VR allows itself to be a much broader experience than, let's just say, straight-ahead gaming goes. And we're going to learn exactly what that looks like. But in the last 20 years, we've launched PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 itself is the fastest-growing PlayStation platform of all time. We kind of know how to predict that trajectory. But honestly, the whole idea of virtual reality comes in perpendicular into that business model. And we're going to have to learn exactly how big is big on that. But I do believe in my heart that it's a very broad tent, and I think it can appeal to a very wide range of users.
Why? Why is it a broader range than gaming itself?
Because I think it allows a different type of experience. A lot of the stuff you'll see now, Corey, if you get your hands on some of the gaming kit, is that we have really high-powered, high-intense action games, as you'd imagine. But I think there is a very considered, there's a very deep experience one has with VR, which befits to maybe even slower, more exploratory. A lot of the puzzle games, a lot of the detective, adventure, investigative kind of games, those are doing pretty well in our consumer feedback as well. So I think there's a really broad range, and once you put the headset on, it's very intuitive how to go forward from there. So I think we can appeal to a large audience.
Sony PlayStation Chief Sean Layden speaking to our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, and Carol Masser. Our guest host for the hour, David Kirkpatrick, still with me. And David, you have some interesting thoughts on the future of VR because you actually don't think gaming is going to take it to the masses. And if not, what will or will it ever get there?
Well, first, I do think that Sony's really smart to be embracing VR to the degree they are. I just noticed, I'm just noting my own feelings about Sony are slightly shifting because they've seemed kind of out of it in recent years. And this could really improve their brand image, even if gaming isn't going to be a gigantic market for them. I think the social experiences that VR can eventually create are where the big opportunity lies. And, you know, Oculus, which is owned by Facebook, had their big event just last week, or a week and a half ago. And, you know, Zuckerberg gave a demonstration on stage. And the part that I don't think was sufficiently enough written about and talked about was the social VR experiences that he demonstrated. And actually, they have two different ways that Facebook and Oculus are developing social VR. And, you know, I even think for things like, you know, travel experiences where you can really model an entire city with photographic VR and you can travel there with your friends, it may be more like shared experiences rather than games where large numbers of citizens of the planet start to really get involved with this new technology. I do believe eventually this could be as big as smartphones, but it's not anywhere near that anytime soon, and it's not going to get there with games alone.
All right. Well, the race between Sony, HTC, Oculus is on now officially. David Kirkpatrick, my guest host for the hour, CEO of Techonomy. As always, David, thrilled to have you with us.
Thanks for having me
on the show. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow, an extended conversation with the 4 founders of Box. It's a story you don't hear often in tech. All 4 founders still at the company more than a decade after they started it. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.